This is Media Philosophy, exploring the deeper side of democracy, or more or less why people don't really care about it. Right now, online, you see a bunch of people just crying, democracy's dying, constitutional crisis this, constitutional crisis that, Donald Trump breaking the law, monarchy, plutocracy, oligarchy, whatever you want to say. You just hear a lot of terms thrown around, but guess what? The average American just doesn't care. As we saw with the last presidential election, one of the most hyped up elections, well, it did have an impressive turnout, just like I would say the last several elections have had. It still has the constant theme of just a third of the country sitting out, and even right now, you can just tell people don't really either understand what's going on, but I would say more importantly, don't really care, because what people ultimately care about isn't who's in charge. They're more concerned about just their day-to-day, their environments around them. And you can really see that in probably your own organization. I mean, do you really care who the CEO is? No. You just care about getting your paycheck. And you can see this throughout history. Think about how many villages and small farmlands, ambitious people probably riding through all the time being like, I'm your king now, you farm for me. And the serfs are just like, okay, can I get back to my turnips now? Because your commoner, again, doesn't care. There's always going to be these huge, big forces battling out. And then there's always going to be just maybe the good 1984 term, the proles, just the common folks who are just trying to get by. And that makes up a much larger portion of the population than I think anyone can realize, especially when you're online so much. I know I get caught up in this all the time, confusing what I read on Reddit or on YouTube or anything with what's actually going on. Because it's so easy to get drawn into whatever echo chamber that you're a part of. We can't deny that echo chambers exist. We all are part of echo chambers. It's almost just natural that they're gonna exist, because people who like things are gonna band together and be like, yeah, this is great, and they're just gonna naturally kick things that they don't like out. But anyways, that's a whole nother story. Why does your average American care whether or not they get a vote for who's in charge? I mean, obviously a third of Americans are already don't care. Especially when you just see how inefficient democracy can be. And spoiler alert, this is not going to be one of those Curtis Yarvin, democracy is bad, let's replace it sort of videos. That's not what this is. This is going to have a point at the end that I would think is pro-democracy if I'm able to stumble upon it. But let's just go with it, because let's be real. Whether it's inefficient or maybe the word is bipolar, at least in the United States in our whole red versus blue sort of environment that we're just so accepting. Coke versus Pepsi, we can't have any third brands. Marvel versus DC, nothing else matters. Even Microsoft dropped out of the console wars to make it easy so we can just be Nintendo and Sony. It doesn't even matter that neither one of them are American companies. They just need to keep up that dichotomy. But regardless, just look what's happening with Trump right now and what could happen. I mean, these executive orders that are probably going to last for 4 years and then end, and then just, the humanitarian aid that was just like cut off all of a sudden. What I'm trying to say is every 4 years or so, it seems like there's a chance for the country just to go wild in one direction, and then it usually goes wild in the other direction, and then the end result is not too much of real substance gets done in especially the long term. And that's what I would say is the biggest downside of democracy, is how can you have a even a 20-year vision, which in the eyes of a sovereign nation, I would say 20 years is not that long. But how can you even look 20 years down the line and say, this is what we need? Because unfortunately with democracy, you get elected by either maybe peddling easy answers or appeasing to a voter base, and it's really hard to want to hurt that voter base, even if that means raising taxes when it's necessary. It's just when you are beholden to the people for your vote, you could have a good heart and want to do the right thing, which sometimes maybe it is raising taxes, but because everything's going to be politicized, your opponent might just use that as ammunition against you. And as we can see, being able to say just things cost more now and point the finger at somebody is a incredibly effective political strategy. It's very receptive because it's very apparent. So how can America do what's necessary, do what's hard, without having just a clear vision? And the only way you can have a clear vision, I mean, when you think about countries that have a clear vision, again, spoiler alert, this is not pro what I'm talking about for everybody who's just ready to click and argue with me and just yell at me. I'm just trying to preempt that now. But anyways, when I think of countries that actually have strong visions, it are countries with strong dictatorial leaderships, maybe like Russia or China. And that's just because they can just sort of control everything that comes out. They can think what's the country going to look like in 20, 25 years. They can sort of get comfortable in power and sort of get in their stride, where for a lot of these leaders in Congress, they just got to keep being aware of the fact that they could get the axe at any time, which again is probably for the best, because in theory, the folks should be pretty, should care who is leading them. But as we've seen, that just doesn't actually exist in practice. So it's so funny that, and I'm going back to probably like the whole butterfly revolution. I just think it's so funny because these sort of, ideas of like dictatorship and how to like suppress votes have always kind of been around. And I just think it's kind of funny that there might come a point where people are pushing that you do need some sort of IQ test to actually start voting or something. It's just going to be funny if that's going to be like some way that the system sets up that only the right people get to vote. Right now I'm just theory crafting some conspiracy theories, so I'll just continue on. But I guess that is part of the point. If you have just a really dumb populace and they get to elect the people, then what is the quality of the people in charge? A quote I've been seeing float around a lot is when the jester sits in the throne, he doesn't become a king, the castle just becomes a circus, something like that. And that there's just a lot of potential for that to happen with democracy. I mean, I would say a lot of people are looking at some of the senators that won in 2024 and can see that they're just big old grifters or whatever, but maybe they just had the most money and were able to, just reach the most people because money really does matter. But anyways, I digress. That's just another example of just why maybe democracy doesn't really work. Because, again, if you can't elect the right people and these people can't even stay in to have their vision, what's the point? Well, the point is a fascist or dictator state sounds great, if you could pick who was in charge. I mean, if somebody was in the president's seat or the almighty leader seat for all time and they thought exactly like you do, shared your same beliefs on hot topic issues, then yeah, dictatorship's probably really attractive. And because they're going to just do what you want to do. I mean, imagine if the progressives got to pick the almighty leader, and that almighty leader could say, we're going to turn highways into high-speed rails, we're going to start investing in nuclear, we're really going to put the planet's, ecosystem, the planet's green health above everything else. There would be a sizable number of the population who are excited about it. There's going to be a sizable number of the population who are upset about it, and there's going to be an equally sizable population who will only care if it actually affects their day-to-day in an obviously negative manner. Because again, the peons don't care. I don't care who's in charge on a grand scheme. I mean, I'm going to be in this position whether Trump or Kamala won that election regardless. I know elections have consequences, and a lot of people are upset, but I'm just saying for the vast majority of elections, most people are just going to worry about, is my immediate people that I love okay? And it's really hard, I guess, to really get people to care about others beyond themselves. But that, I guess, is a whole nother video in itself. But yeah, so again, dictatorship is great if your dictator is advocating for maybe healthcare for all, or whatever you believe in, higher education. But again, it's when the opposition is in that seat that is such that the issue starts becoming apparent. It's great when your guy is the dictator, but when the other person is full steam ahead and there's no way to change it, well, then it sucks. But again, I wonder just how many people are going to go just with conformity. I would say that one of humans' weird strengths is just, how malleable we are and how adaptive we are to situations. So because you can't really control, though, who is in charge in these dictatorships, and because the dictatorship can only appease a set amount of the population, that's why I'm ultimately still for whatever you want to call it, democracy, republic. I mean, that's again another problem is, you go online and I feel like you can't even get a straight answer of what the United States is. So for simplicity's sake, I guess we'll just call it a democracy. But that's just the main thing, is because the dictatorship just ignores too many people and there's no real legitimate way for the opposition to voice themselves. That's what I would say is the main issue with the dictatorship. While having stability and having a long-term plan sounds really, really attractive, it's only attractive when you picture that 20-year long-term plan is being run by your guy, because that 20-year plan can get pretty scary pretty fast depending who is drawing up the plans. There's clearly no perfect system of government, and I would say there's probably even some advantages to the two-party system that we have here in America. It might not seem like things do get done, but when you look across the rest of the world, it just seems like when you have a million parties, a million coalitions, it just leads the way to even more chaos. So there's never gonna be a perfect system. It is gonna be really interesting to see if there's any long-term effect, though, of, they're saying like COVID reading scores still haven't rebounded, math scores haven't rebounded. If there is a true idiocracy situation happening in the background, and in 20 years from now, we really are just electing people like Snooki from Jersey Shore. That really just shows how old I am. That was my go-to. I have no idea who's contemporary. But yeah, we'll see what's going to happen in the future. Again, still pro-democracy, even though there's faults, even though there's vulnerabilities. It's important to at least give people the option to exercise, their voice. Not everyone's going to take it, and that's fair, and that's just the weird thing about democracy. It's not even like who is more qualified, who has the better plan. It literally is just who can get more votes than the other guy? Or I guess at least in the presidential case, who can get as many votes in this many states as the other person? So again, it's just strange that there really is no merit to anything. Snoop Dogg could legitimately run, and if enough people voted for him, he could be our Snoop Dogg in chief. I mean, that's basically the last quest that he has to complete. Unfortunately, he may have already used all his goodwill, but hey, you never know who good old Donald Trump is gonna tap. Mr. President Donald Trump is gonna tap. Kennedy Center's now open. We might have a new secretary to music, or maybe even a secretary to rolling. This is Media Philosophy, exploring the deeper side of entertainment.